What's up guys, I'm Awesmic, that guy who does the DOA lore and trivia stuff. I've never done this type of video before, at least not with another YouTuber, but there's a recent DOA content creator that got on my radar lately, and that's Mondy MFZB. Two videos of his caught my interest, one about his take on a potential DOA reboot, and the other about fanservice. The thumbnails really grabbed my attention, so I gave them a watch. From the jump, I could tell he is really passionate about the franchise, and he made some interesting and valid points. In this video, I'll be giving feedback on some of these points and expand upon these ideas where I can.
Personally, I think I would have preferred DOA 7 instead of a reboot, but I think for the series as a whole, it probably would be best to do a reboot. Now, here's why. Nowadays, fighting games do have somewhat of a story element to them. It's not necessarily a deep, interesting story all the time, such as like the Mortal Kombat franchise. I think the Mortal Kombat and Injustice franchise typically do a pretty decent job with their stories, right? Like there's a lot of lore there, they have a cinematic, story mode experience, which is great, right? And it feels like a premium product because even if you're not necessarily good at that fighting game, you still get a entertaining like hour-and-a-half movie experience that you get to fight and enjoy, right? There's also other games that do story mode like Guilty Gear, where it's kind of just like actually just watching an anime where you just watch the story mode itself and you don't really do anything. Me personally, I'm not a fan of that because I do feel like at that point, it's like, why am I playing a game then? Like I feel like there needs to be more interaction when it comes to a story mode in a video game, because if it's just watching it, it really doesn't feel like you should be booting up your console to do that for me. And I just feel like after watching like stuff happen, I'm like, I want to fight, like I don't want to keep sitting here wasting time or like what, I don't know. It just doesn't feel right to me.
Oh man, you missed out on a lot, dude. There was a Dead or Alive game that not only blended cinematic storytelling with gameplay interaction, it actually did it well, albeit with mostly static cutscenes. And it came from the most unlikely of places, Dead or Alive Dimensions on the Nintendo 3DS. Even for the limitations of the platform, this is some real high quality shit for a 3DS fighting game. Highly recommend if you ever want to check it out. But what makes this game so great on terms of its story mode is that it not only tells a straightforward cinematic story that breaks into 5 major parts, the game has brief mini tutorials that teach you basic situations regarding how the game is played. It should also be noted that Dead or Alive Dimensions is a retcon of the first 4 games that segues into Dead or Alive 5 by a 2-year time skip, so that'll give better narrative context going into Dead or Alive 5 and Dead or Alive 6. If a reboot were to happen, expanding upon the methods used in Dead or Alive Dimensions and blending it more seamlessly into a story battle would be both immersive and educational in my opinion. And if they could pull it off narratively for every character, all the better.
DOA 5 and DOA 6, it's like they know how to make cutscenes, they know how to make interesting interactions with characters, but the problem is they all feel so random. Like when you play through the story mode of either of those games, which those are the 2 games that I have played and I started with, so when you play through those though, it feels like, okay, something cool is kind of happening, but I don't really know how to follow along with this, and then it's like you jump from words on the screen that are supposed to explain a bunch of stuff to then characters meeting each other, and it looks like it's a cool interaction, but at the same time you don't really know what's going on, and it's, I don't know, it's just so, it feels so random. Like it feels way too random all over the place, and then out of nowhere you cut from this like really high intense moment from like Helena and Hayate to Tina and Mila like cooking at a bar or something. Like it never feels complete, it never feels coherent, it always feels super random. And for me, that's the one thing that DOA has been lacking on for like a while, the past 2 games for sure. But I think as someone who is new to DOA, this could be a huge opportunity for them to get their shit together and actually make a good story and good story mode for people to really actually get into the series with.
I gotta be honest, I'm not a fan of the way Dead or Alive 5 story mode was handled either, at least not in a Pulp Fiction-esque way they intended it. Me personally, I like the option to play out the entire cinematic story in one seamless go, or in chapters with varying difficulties and unique, worthwhile unlockables for completing them on said varying conditions.
The downside to them doing a reboot is that my main, Mila, who I love, absolutely love to death, may or may not make it to the roster in a Dead or Alive reboot. But I think she would definitely make it if this was a Dead or Alive 7 instead of a reboot. So that's kind of where I am conflicted, because to me, Mila is probably the one character in any fighting game that I have put the absolute most time into. I know like literally all of her moves and like what they do, and you know, I know that saying that is kind of like, oh well, you know, that's not necessarily saying much, because I also know every move for Jury, like in Street Fighter, and I know everything that they do and what they're used for and all that. But I feel like when it comes to Dead or Alive, it's a little bit different, because each character has like so many different moves, such a huge arsenal of moves used for different things, and like each one is just so, you know, like there's just so much variety in every moveset of every character of Dead or Alive. And I feel like me saying that about a Dead or Alive character has a lot more merit than me saying that about a different character in a different fighting game.
I don't main Mila myself, but I get it. I totally get it. Mila's playstyle is very solid, and narratively, she has plenty of potential for character development as someone whose passion for fighting was directly inspired by legacy character Bass Armstrong since she was a child. It would be even better though if she was retconned in the reboot as a childhood friend of Diego, the latter having a grudge on Doatek because his estranged father worked for the company and left him to take care of his mother with an undisclosed illness, giving the both of them a way to work into the main story. So unless Itagaki somehow comes back to Team Ninja and decides to scrap every character from Dead or Alive 5 onwards, which is most unlikely because Itagaki has only voiced disdain for Marie Rose in particular, I think you got nothing to worry about.
Other things that I want, I mean, I would love for them to bring back tag mode. To be honest, I think that was such a huge thing for me in DOA 5.
So much this.
But also want them to step their game up with the stages, because DOA 6 really dropped the ball with a lot of their stages, and 5 was doing so well and so good with the Attack on Titan stage and everything. Like, oh, there's so many cool stages in 5, you know, so many interactables and the cliffhangers, everything. Like, it was so cool.
Now, moving on to the second video, which focused on fan service in Dead or Alive.
Now let's be real, I think a lot of us DOA fans love the sex appeal and, you know, the fact that we can have these really intense, dramatic, epic fights with these girls that also are, you know, wearing skimpy clothing, look really sexy, and they're just waifu material, right? Like, I think that is definitely one thing that makes Dead or Alive stand out from all the other fighting games out there, right? Like, Dead or Alive is definitely known for having that and stands out for having that for sure. Like, it definitely plays a big role in making Dead or Alive unique.
At least it used to be. Nowadays, I debate that the sex appeal of Dead or Alive has rubbed off on other fighting games more than ever, some more in plain sight than others. I'd also debate that sex appeal wasn't the only thing that made Dead or Alive unique. Tell me, how many fighting games do you know have defensive holds of varying degrees as a universal mechanic, let alone the ability to use them while you're stunned for most hits? And while it wasn't the first to use interactive environments, it certainly did that a hell of a lot better than Samurai Showdown 64 and has been synonymous with it ever since.
That way. And me personally, you know, obviously I love anime, I love my waifus, you know, and I do love the fact that Dead or Alive has that element there, you know, has that sexiness factor to it where, you know, you've got these really hot anime girls on the screen, but at the same time, you know, they're throwing hands for real. Like, oh my god, you just see Mila duff Honoka to the face. Meanwhile, Kasumi is walking down the stairs as she's stomping on your face as you get pummeled to the ground. Like, it's dope. Like, I love that, you know. At the same time, you know, we see those magical physics on the screen. But all jokes aside, I mean, I think it's really cool, and I've never had an issue with it. I would consider myself to have a pretty open mind about those kind of things, and just in general about a lot of things. So it's never really bothered me. I've always seen it as like a, oh hey, that's pretty cool, like fan service and stuff. But I've also at the same time always seen Dead or Alive for what it really is, which is a highly skillful fighter that is easy to pick up but can get super deep once you learn the mechanics and everything like that.
And that, Mondy, is the type of mindset that everyone should have.
As great as I think the games in this franchise are, we can't deny the Dead or Alive franchise and the Dead or Alive community is very small, is very, very niche, right? I think a big part of that is the fact that, you know, a lot of people just see the waifus, the big booba, and then they're like, oh yeah, this game is only for degenerates, right? They don't see the high level competitive aspect there. And let's face it, for a video game franchise to succeed, you know, to hold its own, it's gonna need a big community, right? And I think that The developers are probably thinking, in order for our game to succeed, we need the game to be displayed at, big tournaments like EVO, the recent European tournament that just happened, UFA, right? Like all these huge tournaments, they want DOA to be there, right? And I think that one thing that might detract from these bigger tournaments wanting to display DOA is that sex appeal. And again, it shouldn't be that much of an issue if they have the option to turn it on or off, but I think that it'll probably be an unnecessary big deal or like some kind of drama to where if they're showing a tournament without the sex appeal, people in chat might be like begging for it or something like that. I don't know. Like if the option is there, that might make the developers think that, okay, this might happen or that might happen. So they might just want to say either don't do it at all or, do it in a different type of way.
Oh, we had the options. The problem was how the PR handled it with Dead or Alive 6. The PR misfire is further compounded with expensive season passes that cost more than a base game itself, some with no option to buy individually unless you exclusively buy the pass. And the exposure minimization option later patched into Dead or Alive 6 just looks tacky on some costumes. Instead of going that route, it should group the more naturally modest costumes in one set while locking out the rest from being selected. But that's just me.
Aside from story, the only real reason they would have to do a reboot is to cater to a brand new audience. And I think all of that would make sense, right? I think they would want to get new people in that see DOA for not just the waifu, big booba, and see it for everything else that it has to offer. And then that way they can start having more tournaments and people can take it more seriously and stuff like that.
And I say let them talk their shit. At the end of the day, it's a vocal minority projecting their own insecurity. If Dead or Alive was really for degenerates, what the fuck does that say about Street Fighter fans who, for lack of better wording, can't get enough of the Footsies game, Leg Day, or that one chick from Family Matters I don't blame Urkel for drooling over? What does that say about KOF fans who have been clamoring for a certain Orochi chick who will remain nameless, and still embrace a certain fiery ninja who has an uncompromised design to this very day? And what does that say for Soul Calibur fans who absolutely love Ivy, the Alexander sisters, Taki, or even Voldo? Okay, maybe Voldo, I'll give you that one. I could go on with many other fighting games, but the point is this. They can't all be degenerates, and even then, I don't see any of them losing sleep over that shit. They're still supporting their scene and growing their community all the same. If there's anything Team Ninja and even certain parts of the community need to learn right now, it's that they need to stop caring about how people from the outside looking in perceive them, and just embrace what made them so endearing to the fans in the first place. If they do this, keep tabs with constructive community feedback, and respect the customer's time and money, especially the season passes, then the franchise's reputation will be bolstered over time. Forget about tell-all interviews catering to certain audiences who had no intention of buying the game to begin with. Forget trying to be an overnight success. Part of what made Itagaki's era of Dead or Alive games such a success was that for the most part, he simply let the games themselves do the talking. And from there, word of mouth was enough. I believe if Yasuda keeps that same energy for the next Dead or Alive, if there's a next Dead or Alive, then it will succeed.